and welcome back to Talk of Fame podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Montini, and joining us today on the Talk of Fame podcast, we have casting director, author of The Great Daddy Hunt, owner of the bikini company called the Boyfriend Bikini, and the host of the Strictly Stalking the Last Year podcast, Jaimie Beebe. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm super excited to have you on the podcast. It's such a pleasure. And how are you today, especially? How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Of course. So, I know a lot of people know you as a casting director. I know you've been doing this for a couple of years now. How did you kind of discover people as a casting director? I know a lot of people don't know how casting directors really discover people, but on your end, how do you discover people as a casting director for entertainment purposes?
Well, most people I get through agents and managers. So when I get a project, the producers we talk about what they need, the characters they're looking for, the type of people that they want. And then usually I put a breakdown on a website that kind of everybody uses. And then agents and managers will go through and submit the people that seem to fit for what I'm looking for. And then I'll also call a lot of agents and managers that I know that I have personal relationships with and see who might be available for the role and who they think might fit well for the role. And then from there, we either get self-tapes or we do auditions and then keep narrowing it down until we choose the right person.
Is the process very hard to do when you're choosing roles? Because I know for me, if I had to choose this one person, it's just I can't just choose one person. I have to choose multiple people.
Yeah, I mean, it can be really hard. Sometimes, just the right person just floats up to the top and it's an easier choice. But a lot goes into it, and there's a lot of people that help make that choice. The producers, the director, myself, the casting director, everybody kind of puts that choice together. So usually we can all agree and narrow it down pretty quickly.
And who plays a valid role? Is this the casting director that does all the work? Is it or is it the director, a producer, is the whole cast?
It's everybody. It's everybody. I kind of do the beginning stages myself usually, finding who I think would be a good fit for the role. And then, I'll get all the self tapes, or I'll do the auditions and tape those. And I'll go through that and pick the best ones. And that's who I send over to the director and the producers. And then from there, we usually discuss it for a little while. And sometimes we, do a callback where the director and producers can get to know the actor. And sometimes, we just see the right person and bam, that's the person, and we go from there.
It seems sometimes it's an easy process. Sometimes easy, sometimes it's hard, depending on the role. I know with
Yeah.
everything it's very different from the last one you did.
Yeah. Everything is really different. I definitely never get bored.
Yeah.
It's, different roles, different types of people, different characters every time. And sometimes it is kind of easy, I guess. It took a long time to get to this point, where, I kind of know a lot of times when I read a script who pops into mind, people I've worked with before, or people who've auditioned for me before that I'm like, oh, this person would be great for that role, so I'll call them up and get a tape from them. Um, and so I think through the years, I've kind of honed in on how to do it, the most concise way possible.
And the good thing about being a casting director is that it keeps you busy all the time. It keeps you busy, never get bored of it. It's if you want to do something, just oh, I'm just go do my casting director work. It's always that's something to do when you're on your free time and stuff.
That's true. It does definitely keep me very busy. There's always tapes to watch. There's always new actors coming on the scene to meet. A lot of agents and managers, when they sign someone new, they'll send me all their new people and their reels and stuff so I can check them out. And that way it's fresh in my mind when I have a project coming up, and I'll think about that person. So yeah, it definitely keeps me busy.
Exactly. And were you a production manager before you became a casting director?
I was. That was kind of my first introduction into the industry. I had a friend who wanted to be a director and have a production company. And it was just kind of me and him. And he said, "Oh, well, you can manage the production company." And I was like, "Well, I don't know how to do that because I've never even been on a set, But luckily, this day and age, everything is online. Everything you need to learn is online. And, I just started off Googling everything. And it's also about who you hire. I hired the right lighting people, the right camera people. And I think that's a really important aspect of being in charge of something is hiring the right people around you.
Mhm.
You never want to try and do everything yourself. If you can hire somebody else that knows more than you, it's a great way to learn. And so that's kind of how I started into it. But one of the jobs that I did do myself while I was working with that company was all the casting. So it was kind of an easy transition to go from that into casting. I loved the casting aspect of things. I kind of get to spread good news and tell everyone, hey, you got the job, congrats. And I get to meet a lot of people. So it seemed like the right fit for me.
Like I know, like with being a production manager and doing the casting, it seems like you basically already know like what to kind of do in terms of like making that transition to being a casting director. Like, of course, there's still things to learn, but then you still have a lot of details in mind on what to do in that position now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a pretty good transition into that, and I got the opportunity to kind of make some mistakes along the way and learn that way, which I think was is great. You can learn a lot reading and online and from people, but actually doing it really it helps. It helps to
Yeah,
actually do it and make those mistakes and learn from it that way.
yeah, and like that's what the best thing about YouTube and everything is for. Is that like when we don't want to like spend money on things, which I hate spending money unless it's like a good cause and I'll make it a session. But like if it's something for like a job, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm just gonna go to YouTube because YouTube or the internet is like the best thing ever happened to me in terms of like having a job and trying to figure out what to do.
Totally. Totally. It's so easy. When I'm much older than you, but when I first started out, there was no internet or
Yeah.
Wi-Fi or any of that kind of stuff. I remember when the first cell phones came out and they were not what they are now.
Mhm.
And I think that, there's so much available at our fingertips now to just learn and learn for free, which is amazing.
And so like I like have no idea how like kind of people did it like when they didn't have cell phones. So because like it's like of course like you gotta learn, but then like technology wasn't a big thing like years ago in the early 2000s, late 90s. It wasn't a big thing, especially in entertainment. Like you need to actually have people that actually sign. And like self-tapes were a thing back then. It was always in-person auditions. So like I'm like how am I that I think myself, how am I supposed to live in the 90s if there's no technology? And I'm like,
That's
people might
true.
seem like, oh, I'm a technology nerd, which I'm not, by the way. But it might seem like everything revolves about technology nowadays, but it's like, like t technology can be good and bad, but like with needing help with things, technology can be very good for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely changed my job with casting. I mean, we used to have paper copies of resumes and paper, and their photos, like copies of their photos. And, everybody had to show up for the auditions. And I think that, with self tapes and everything being online, I mean, obviously, I think it's a little better for the environment. We're not
Yeah.
printing everything off. But also, I think it's great for time management. People don't have to drive around town. LA is a big city. New York is a big city. You have to go
Mhm.
all around town to all these different auditions and things. And, it's not, there are some things that we lose with that. And that, my dog, that's just like the personal aspect, of like meeting people in person and stuff. But, with Zoom and, FaceTime type of things, we can kind of overcome that. But
Mhm.
overall, I think, technology has really helped out the industry a lot.
And wasn't the change like difficult for you when you went from like production manager to casting director, or was it kind of like a smooth type of like thing to kind of transition? Because I know you had some experience with casting and stuff before.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was pretty smooth because I think I was just like I naturally gravitated toward the casting. I really liked it. And if I like something, I'm like all in, you know?
Yeah.
And when I was, you know, working in production and management, I was able to meet a lot of agents and managers that way. So that really helped with the seamless move over into casting, because that's kind of the number one thing. You know, it's true. It is in who you know and who knows you, in order to get emails responded to, and you know, to for people to take phone calls and things like that.
That's the best thing about this industry is that like you make connections all over. Like you meet people that you may know and like connections between every person will probably have a project that is like for you. And that's the best part about this is like you always know someone fit for something.
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely.
And like you are the owner of a bikini company called the Boyfriend Bikini, which is about personal growth, finding inner peace, claiming your true happiness, and being a boss. Like, I absolutely love the mission. Like, how does your brand channel like personal growth and like mental health?
Well, you know, so I it kind of all ties in randomly with a lot of the other things I'm doing in life. I was in a very toxic relationship for a long time, unfortunately. And when I finally got out, you know, I realized that I'm not the only girl that's been in, you know, a horrible relationship like that. But it was really hard to not only get out, but then to rebuild my life after that. And so one of the things that I always wanted to do was kind of like have my own bikini company. And in rebuilding my life after that relationship, I started traveling more, and I traveled by myself. I've traveled the entire world by myself, and I've gone to, you know, I don't 45 countries alone. And
Oh, wow.
you know, and it was really scary at first. It was terrifying, but I wanted to do it, you know. Plenty of people do it. I can do it too. And I think like that growth of like starting to do things on my own and realizing that I do have that confidence, you know, and that I can do things after, especially after being shut down so much in such a bad relationship. But I realized, you know, I'm not the only, I'm one in a million women who have to go through this. You know, a lot of people are in abusive, horrible relationships and things like that. So, you know, in doing all that, one day I was like, okay, like today's the day I'm going to do this bikini company. And I did. And so part of the proceeds goes to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, because you know, that was, you know, it's a big thing that I dealt with and a lot of women deal with. And I think, you know, that really spurs like the growth, and it's hard to get out of those relationships. So, you know, the other part of the bikini company is just like, you know, not just having, you know, learning that confidence, getting that growth, but um once the company grows, the company itself starts growing, what I really like to do is kind of franchise it so that women that are coming out of shelters after being in, you know, a domestic violence situation, they can, you know, take a portion of the company and sell their own bikinis, you know, and that way they don't have to put the money out, you know, they'd be selling and getting a portion of the proceeds for themselves, because it's really hard. And a lot of women end up going back to their prior relationship when they leave these shelters because they don't have anything. They might not have a place to live. They don't have money for food. They don't, you know, they might have kids. It's really hard to get back on your feet. So I'm hoping in the long run that this company can help other women, you know, get that confidence back, get back on their feet, you know, financially, personally, and things like that.
Oh, that's amazing. Like your company is definitely making an impact for sure. Like it's just like I know people that dealt with toxic relationships and like what ha I have seen, like it's just like it's very hard. Like I can tell like by people, like social media is not about like because I know a lot of people through social media think like, oh, I want this relationship, like, oh, they seem so happy, I can have a relationship like that. But then like social media, you do not know what's going on behind the scenes of that picture.
Exactly.
Like they could
It,
easily, let's just say, be fighting. Like you do not know what's going on behind the picture. They might just be smiling, then out of the picture just frowning. You know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
that's so true. That's so true. Like I used to post pictures of me and my ex all the time. I would do hashtag best boyfriend ever. And no one knew that I had been crying 10 minutes before that picture was taken, or he was yelling at me 10 minutes before. So it's like what we portray on social media is not real life, and that's fine. But I think especially sometimes with anybody, like it's hard to see all these great things that are happening all day long on social media, and you think that's what's happening, and then your life is kind of like a mess. Your
Yeah.
life is a runaway train, or you think so, and then everyone else is doing so great, but really it's not like that.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure how to change the narrative on that. You know, I don't think that people need to put everything that's terrible about their lives on social media either. I just
Hmm.
think that it needs to come from an internal place where you need to realize that, you're putting your best foot forward on social media. So is everybody else, so everybody has bad days. Everybody has bad relationships. You know, everyone's going through something, but we just don't see it on social media. So yeah, like you
Hmm.
don't really know what's happening with people.
Yeah, and like with people being in toxic relationships, like with them like getting out of it, like you, it's just like I like applaud you and everyone else for like getting out of it because I know like it can be very hard and especially exhausting to try to get out of it because you don't know how the other person is going to react in that situation. Like you don't know like what's going to happen. So it's just like I know it can be very hard to be in that situation. Like because I know like a lot of people, especially social media, like you said, people can see a picture and be like, "Oh my God, like they're so happy. I'm happy for that person." You may never know. You might actually be happy in that picture and all these things. You may never know, but it's like, so you may never know what happened 10 minutes before that picture was taken. Like I took a
It's so
million
true.
pictures before, and I was miserable and having a bad day before the picture was taken and posted on social media. Like you just do not know what like people are going through. Like I like but sometimes I'm like, you might see that picture of these people happy and having fun, like going traveling and all these things, but they might actually have a reason for that. Like for me, like traveling is an escape from reality. Like it's just like a escape from what I'm going through and have like a such a relief for a couple of days and have fun for myself, not for anyone else but me.
Hmm. Yeah, and what you said about when people leave a toxic relationship, is one of the most dangerous times because,
Mhm.
especially if it is an abusive relationship, that's when, your abuser thinks that there's nothing left to lose. And, a lot of women do get seriously hurt or, you know, murdered at that point, in
Yeah.
from an abusive relationship is when they leave. And I think that's one of the reasons it's so hard for women to leave an abusive relationship. And that's why, supporting the women's shelters and the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence is really important because it does take money to leave those relationships. A lot of times the women in those relationships are controlled by finances, maybe they're not allowed to work or the other person is taking all their money. They literally have nothing at that point.
Mhm.
And so, not only is it dangerous, but it's hard to leave.
Yeah, yeah, it's very hard. And I know like I don't know if you know this foundation, but it's like it was like the Joyful Heart Foundation that was founded years ago by Mariska Hargitay. It is really founded for domestic violence and all
Mm-hmm.
these things, which I love because like not there's not a lot of organizations that kind of that's mission is about domestic violence and it's kind of the reality about it. Because like I
Yeah.
like because like when you leave a domestic violent relationship or abusive or toxic or whatever like whatever you guys want to call it is it can be very hard mentally physically and like it's very draining like even like you can drain all your mentally make you tired all you want to do is sleep like with me like whenever I'm upset and all miserable I'm like I just want to sleep like it's just like I don't know why, but I'm the person that loves to sleep. I don't know why, but it's a kind of like a bad habit, but it's like whenever you're going through that hard time, like you probably want giving the money away to that person, or you don't have any food and you have to live out maybe sometime on the streets or whatever the situation may be, it's going to be hard after. Because like sometimes you do not know where your life is going to be like after you leave. because you're so used to being with that person that you're like,
Yeah.
what am I supposed to do with myself without that person being my life? Even though
Well,
it's the best decision for yourself and your well-being, you just don't know how to live after.
well, yeah, and a lot of the times those types of relationships become very addictive because the abusers they get it into this cycle where they're going to be so nice, they're going to get flowers, everything is great, they're affectionate and wonderful and telling you these nice things for like a certain amount of time. So,
Mhm.
you get used to that, you get addicted to that feeling. And then, something happens, usually in their own personal lives, that has nothing to do with you. And then that's when the abuse comes back. So it is just that circle of like, nice, 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 and then something will happen and then it's abuse again. And then, so you get used to that and you wait for those nice times, which from experience, it becomes less and less. The
Yeah.
bad times will always take over. And what they say, if somebody hurts you once, they will continue, because the
Yeah.
only way not to let that happen is to leave the first time. But you don't think of that. um
Mhm.
you know I'm a smart girl, and I always was like, oh, if anything, I'll leave the first time anyone does anything. And I didn't. I stayed for 7 years. And it's because, those apologies and, oh, I'm gonna go get help, and I love you so much and I'm so sorry. And so, you want to believe it so bad that you do. And you've already put all this energy into this person, because no relationships start out like that. It's usually within the
Mhm.
first 3 years, 6 months that, the first incident will happen. And it's hard to leave by that point, and a
Mhm.
lot of people ask, like, well, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you leave? Because it's very, very hard, and you're stuck in
Mhm.
this cycle, and usually you're isolated from your other friends and family. And so this is the only person that you have. So it is very hard to leave. So hopefully with, especially with more technology and, more things like the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence and shelters, we will be able to help more people.
Definitely. Like these with these resources, like I know with these things, like it's growing over time, especially with our technology and like people deserve to get help, especially these things, because it's happening more and more as time goes by.
Yeah.
And the media like doesn't really talk about it. It's never on the news really. And like we need more people like you to really kind of talk about it because not a lot of people is really talking about their experiences and open up. It's like I know like, with a lot of people, like sharing your experiences and their stories can be very hard. Like for me, like sharing my story, my experiences with anxiety and depression was very difficult. Because I know like once you kind of grow that confidence into like talking about what you dealt with, it's very strong with the person that's going through that. Because of course you're helping yourself, but you're also helping other people like, to speak up and going through the same exact thing.
Yeah, and it is really hard to speak up. For years I didn't speak up. But with my podcast, Strictly Stalking, that's kind of another one of those crimes that people don't really talk about, is being stalked. And so, and for that, I interview survivors of stalking, and man, it's hard for them to speak up. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of survivors of stalking have also been through domestic violence. So I'm sitting there, I'm hearing their stories week after week, and I'm like, these people are all coming forward and telling me their stories on this platform so we can help other people. I need to be doing the same thing, in my life. I need to tell my story as well. And once I did, once I kind of opened that floodgate and felt okay talking about what I had been through in that relationship, it did feel better, because I know that,
Yeah.
it is helping other people. And that's why, after I started talking about it, that's kind of why I was like, all right, I'm going to do this bikini company, because it is a way that I can at least give money back, into the system. And hopefully soon, as the company grows, I'll be able to, like I said, kind of franchise that out to other women that are coming out of shelters, so that they'll have something that can keep them away from that relationship.
And like I want to go back to the bikini company. Like, why did you name your company the Boyfriend Bikini? Is it all about like the or like after being out of a relationship, or is it like, oh, this is such a great name to use this company?
So it's funny. I actually wanted to call it the ex-boyfriend. I was, I had a lot of anger in in that relationship. And when I left that relationship, I felt a lot of anger. I was angry at myself for staying so long. I was angry at him for wasting years of my life and for being abusive, simply. And so I called one of my friends and I was like, I'm going to call it the ex-boyfriend. And, I'm going to it's going to be mean about him and stuff. My girlfriend was like, this is a terrible idea. She's like, why would you build something so great on something so negative, and keep that negativity there? And so, I thought about it, I'm like, she's right. So I turned it around and tried to make it into a more positive vibe. So I called the Boyfriend Bikini. And each like style or color is named after a type of guy. But in a more positive way. Like I named one after my dad, who's like the best dad in the world, and I named one after my little brother. I named one after some of my amazing exes that I've had that I'm still friends with, and so, and then each one that's ordered, you get kind of the story about that person and the positive impact that they've made. It's about more like funny, like, or guy friends that I've had, or like about like friends of or husbands of my friends, that I think are great guys. So I wanted to make it more positive and name it after like guys that because there's plenty of amazing men out there. I don't want to be like, men are all bad, because they're not. They're really not. There's a lot of great, amazing men out there. So I just wanted to put that positive spin on it. Because like my girlfriend said, like, why would you build something amazing off of something so negative? And it does come from a negative place in my life, but not anymore, because I've grown from that. And now I'm trying to help other people from that negativity and turning it into a positive thing.
Like, how did you kind of like this make it more of a positive rather than negative company?
Just by mostly by naming it, after men that I think are more positive. I don't want to name one after my horrible ex who was abusive. Like, what you never want to give somebody who is abusive or a narcissist more attention, because that's what they thrive on. That's what keeps them going. So I wanted it to take that away and kind of give the nice guy the attention, like, guys that are friends of mine that are great or whatever, kind of name it after that type of guy. I have one called the Mr. Nice Guy, which kind of reminds me of my business partner. And there's a little story about that. Like, he's a great dude, he's very helpful and wonderful and not anyone that I've ever dated or anything, but he's a great business partner. But I just wanted to kind of put that positive vibe, that positive spin on it, rather than keeping it a negative thing.
Because like if people like see like your business off of a positive pushback against men, because a lot of people think like, oh men, they're so stupid, like oh they're rude, everyone's rude. But not everyone, not every single guy is rude. Trust me. I grew up
Yeah.
with two brothers. I basically have a lot of guys in my family, a lot of guy friends. And like not every guy is horrible. Even though it
That's
might
very
seem
true.
that way, but not every guy is horrible and rude. Like it might seem like that just at the time, but it's not like that.
Yeah. Well, and that's true. And that's something that, when I left that relationship, I didn't date for a long time because, I was kind of scared of men. I'm like, all right, well, I went through that. I'm not going through that again. And it took me a minute to realize that there's so many wonderful men out there. It just, and it's more with me, my personal boundaries now. Like I have some major boundaries, if somebody says, if I'm talking to a guy or seeing a guy and he says something that I don't think is appropriate, then I'm done. Like I can just walk away because I am independent, fully independent, financially independent, confident. So I don't need that anymore.
No one deserves that, honestly. Like, no one
Exactly.
deserves that kind of negative feedback, inappropriate things. No one deserves that ever. But
Exactly.
like, how do you like design the products of your company?
So I'm sorry, what?
How do you design like your products of your company?
So I did not know when I started. I was like, I just, I knew the type of bikinis that I like to wear. But I had no idea how to like make a bikini. So I found a girl in Paris who was going to fashion school. I emailed her and I said, "Hey, can you help me make a pattern? This is kind. I sent her a bunch of photos of me in bikinis. And I was like, this is kind of what I want it to look like this top and this one, you know." And she's amazing. So she did make the pattern for me. And then I went to Bali, in Indonesia, and I found a company out there, a manufacturer that I absolutely love because, it's very ethically produced at that company. The tailors, they have a sewing machine that, we get them, they get to work from home, which is wonderful because then, they just have a deadline. So it's more like a remote working situation. They can spend time with their family, their kids, their friends, they get breaks. They're not in a warehouse. I didn't want that. And they're paid an adequate amount as well. They're paid well, especially for where they live. And because there's no reason to like not pay people enough, like
Yeah.
everyone should be having a great living wage for what they're doing. And so yeah, so I just got them manufactured in Bali. I went recently and picked up a shipment, met everybody, and it was amazing.
Amazing. And like I want to add, you are the host of Strictly Stalking podcast. Like, do you have a stalking story that someone shared that's like kind of meaningful to you?
I've done over 200 interviews
Mm.
for the podcast, which is crazy that so many people are being stalked. One that always sticks out in my mind, because it just kind of reminds me of me, I guess, is this woman. She was younger. She had just moved out of, her parents' house and was going to college. It was like, I think her first year in college. And she was living in this apartment building. And, she was going out a lot, partying, classes, just the full college experience, which I did as well. So I think that's why it reminds me of me. I was like, "Woo, great. I'm out of the house, I'm doing everything."
Yeah, just having fun,
And
not worrying,
yeah. And so
normal
she
things.
slowly noticed that things were like moving around in her house, and she lived alone. Or like eventually she noticed that one day all of her underwear had finally gone missing. Like it was a couple at a time here and there, and she'd be like, "What did I do with my underwear?" Which is kind of like me. I don't know if I would notice right away. I'd be like, "That's weird. I guess the laundry machine ate my underwear again," not really
Yeah.
thinking about it. Because when you're busy like that too, you don't think like someone's stealing all my underwear. But
Yeah,
what
this like
had,
I wouldn't
yeah,
recognize that quickly either. I'd be like, oh, it's just like it's probably the washing machine. You don't
yeah, and
know.
I lose things or whatever. And what had happened eventually is that she realized there was actually a man living in the crawl space up in her place in her apartment watching her. Um and that's terrifying. That is utterly terrifying. And he had been living there for a while watching her. He would come down while she was sleeping, take pictures, steal her underwear and her things. And thank God he got caught before it escalated into, something violent or, kidnapping. Who knows what his real plan was. But I just think like sometimes, especially when you're younger, it's really hard to be aware of what's going on because there's so much happening in your life. And, you have this whole new lifestyle. You just got to college and, it's I think things like that have taught me in my life, like I do need to be aware. And I think things like that have helped me, traveling solo throughout the world because, you really have to be aware when you're doing
Yeah.
that, and to stay safe. So I think it's important to always, remember that you do have to take kind of a step back once in a while and evaluate what's happening in your life, even, whether you're having a great time or not great time. But I think that step back and evaluating is really important to make sure that everything is going good.
Like I couldn't imagine having like a stalker live in your place and not noticing. Like I'll be like, if I saw the person, I'd be like, oh, I'm out of here. I'm not coming back ever again. Like this is honestly
I
horrible.
mean, well, that's the thing. Like he was hiding up in a crawl space above her closet. Like she didn't even know that there was a crawl space up there. There was just like a little hole out of the ceiling that he could move and come down out of her closet. Like if I had rented a place, there's no way I would look up in the ceiling at the closet and think, well, I think someone could crawl up there. You don't think about
Yeah,
that.
you
And
don't think
it,
about that, but you think it's
yeah,
another closet.
yeah, you just don't know, you
Yeah,
know?
you never know. Sometimes you just don't have a clue to is actually happening.
And it could happen to anybody. Anybody.
Anybody.
Yeah.
But like you are the author of The Great Daddy Hunt. Is the cover of your book your dog?
It is. So I mean the book is it's supposed to be funny. Um it was kind of it was a very random experience. I was trying to kind of learn um like the AI illustrations and stuff for some other projects. And I started I just started with the illustrations. I was like, I've already done all these, built all these cool illustrations and whatever, and it's hilarious to me. I'm gonna write a little story to go along with it, and I spend like 24 hours a day with my dog. So yeah, I just tried to write this funny little story, and it's basically where I'm single after the terrible relationship. And so it kind of tells a story of that and how my dog probably should have a daddy because he would probably like one. But it's hard, dating is hard. So he kind of goes throughout the neighborhood and looks around. He does eventually find some, a nice guy that works at a bookstore and brings him home, and it works out happily ever after, which it hasn't in real life yet, but hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon. You guys have to hope. Is the dog a golden retriever?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. His name's Cabo.
Like I would golden retriever myself. They're the best dogs in the world. Like not gonna lie, I literally begged my parents for years, every single day for a golden retriever. I
They
literally
are great.
for Goldens, I begged them every single day, and I gave one for my birthday a couple years ago. And like Goldens are just the best dogs to ever exist. Like so lovable. Like even though
So
they can be
loving.
hyper, they're very hyper at times, but they're just the best dogs ever. Like my mom claims I think it's one of the best things to ever happen to her. Like
Definitely.
these Goldens are just so lovable. It's like they're very cuddly dogs as well. Like they're very cuddly. Well, depending on the dog, not every Golden's like cuddly. I know a lot of
Mine
dogs,
is. Mine is.
but like it's just like the Goldens are just the best dogs in the world.
They really are.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You're amazing and so inspiring. I appreciate you so much and really appreciate you taking the time. You're amazing. Just keep doing what you're doing and I wish you all the best. If you ever need help or anything, feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to help you in any way I can.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so
You
much.
too.
Bye.